Get off my water, Jason.
or I'll fine you forever. Those were the first words the HOA president ever yelled at me, right there on a dock she'd built smack in the middle of my lake. No permit, no shame, waving her clipboard around like she was writing the Ten Commandments herself. Imagine waking up coffee in hand to see a $7 million cabin floating so close to your family's shoreline. It could almost borrow your Wi-Fi, and there's Darla, Queen of the Cove, threatening to ruin your whole year if you so much as breathe near her community project. Yeah, that happened. You ever have a morning start like that? I'm telling you, nothing about it felt legal. Every bit of it felt wrong, like waking up to find your neighbor's dog moving in and bringing a lawyer. What would you have done? Because I just stood there watching Darla flash her little laminated badge and command me to step away from the dock, her voice shrill enough to make the herons reconsider their morning plans. I told her, plain as day, no, this is my lake, and that platform sits right where my granddad marked the line with a bent iron stake back in '72. She gave me a smile that ought to come with a warning label, raised her phone like she was about to start court, and declared, "The community will decide." I just said, "The water'll decide first," and right then the boards under us flexed. I swear the lake itself knocked just once, like it wanted to remind us whose cove this really was. There was a new sign, too, bolted up overnight to a cedar post. Eco Research Access, with a big green arrow pointing at those shiny new planks. Darla stood between me and the steps like a nightclub bouncer. "Temporary installation," she said, all sweet. "Just a pilot." Funny, it didn't feel temporary. The timber under my boots was solid, stubborn, fresh sawdust, still clinging to the grain, 3 brand new lag bolts biting deep into a cross brace that wasn't there last week. There was a steel bracket under the corner thick as a phone book, and a conduit humming quietly, not like a science experiment, but like a fridge you can't unplug. "Temporary, huh?" I muttered. "So why brace it like a hurricane pier?" She just shrugged. I could taste the salt and cedar in the air. Over by the reeds, a skiff stalled out one of her contractors trying to free a line. He hooked something under the deck and froze. His eyes said hazard, mine said I saw it, and we both knew this was no honest project. I grabbed my GPS, planted a bright orange flag where a beam met open water, and slipped a yardstick down between the posts. Quiet work. I took notes, measured again. Darla watched. The lake just waited. "This is a community project, Jason," she said. "We want it done without drama." I told her I was very consistent, especially with property lines. "Stand down for today," she said, waving her permit packet like a white flag. I filmed her notice nothing but a pile of bake sale flyers and a missing kayak. No agency stamp, nothing that meant a thing. "Fines escalate when owners refuse simple requests," she snapped. "Facts or simple permits are proof," I shot back. She talked progress, stewardship, unity. Everyone around just nodded because that's easier than asking questions. The cove, meanwhile, kept its own counsel. The only thing permanent here was the way the boards creaked under my weight. But as I walked the planks, I kept seeing new clues. Fresh scrape marks along the rail, a second brace hiding in the shadows. If this was a pop-up study, then I'm the Queen of England. I took photos, measured again, listened to the tiny ticks in the wood, felt the warm conduit, not idle, but loaded. "Stop touching private improvements," Darla barked. "Private." "On my water," I said. She was getting frustrated now, but honestly, the evidence did all my arguing for me. Neighbors watched from the shore, some filming, some pretending not to notice. Darla made speeches about legacy and unity. I answered with pictures and data. No need to shout when numbers hold the truth. That hook in the water wasn't on any plan I'd signed. Brand new steel-clean welds, bolted tight to a plate, matching the bracket on my dock. "Who put that there?" I asked. "Vendors learn on site," she said, waving off the question. Let me back up a sec. If you've never had to deal with a neighbor who talks like a lawyer but builds like a pirate, you don't know the joy of watching someone try to make temporary mean forever. I flash back to the days I used to run the harbor, how one hidden snag can flip a kid's kayak in 2 seconds. This wasn't about research. It was about building a stage and calling it science. Darla switched gears. Touch that ring again, we call compliance. Call him. I said I'll put on a fresh pot of coffee. She was losing her cool. I set a second GPS point, tied it to the willow on the bank, and watched the tide mark settle lower than last week, soft evidence that the water had been working on this longer than she wanted to admit. Next day, the show hit full throttle banners, speeches, a speaker with a badge announcing a guided walk. They said community so many times the word lost meaning. But I watched the water line instead. When wood and water argue, the truth comes out in how the boards complain. Darla, dressed for TV, opened with a speech about regional pride and donor gifts. All I heard was, "We like things consistent here." That line lands like a velvet brick. A lawyer read out rules about bins and lawns, then smooth as silk slipped in a threat. Fines escalate when owners disrupt progress. Heads nodded, mine didn't, and here's the twist. The middle of their show, a contractor named Elliot slipped me a certificate of insurance hazard exclusion block, bold as daylight. He didn't explain he didn't need to. Our eyes met, and I understood this wasn't covered. When the wind blows wrong, nobody's getting paid. Proof cools tempers fast. I asked Darla for the shoreline permit number. She said, "Trust her." "Trust stands best on more than a smile," I replied. She promised to follow up in writing. Of course she did. Meanwhile, I kept filming the second hidden bracket, the conduit, the choke point where the gangway squeezed the boat lane tight. Took notes, set cameras, measured everything. If you're still with me, you know, paper and pictures hold when speeches don't. Finally, I called the shoreline office and reached Lena Ortiz. She listened, didn't rush, and sent me a quick check. 3 simple questions. Does the structure bear dead load, draw utility power, or narrow the channel? All 3 boxes ticked. That's not temporary, that's a violation. With Elliot's help, I put together a packet, photos, notes, videos, a log of every angle and tide mark. Then I waited. I let the silence do the work. Sometimes the hardest part of justice is waiting for proof to outweigh noise. When the call came, Lena's voice was clear. Abatement steps, permitted document, everything. Mark the corridor, keep the evidence clean. Darla came at me again. New letter, new sweet talk. Optics matter, Jason. I pointed to the humming wires and said, a stage doesn't need a house feed. This time the crew looked away. With the patrol skiff waiting just offshore, I took my saw and chalk and marked every illegal splice. I cut only the joints flagged in my packet, rolled up their plastic river-set lead buoys so no one could miss the new lane. Darla threatened fines. I said photos matter more. And as the last cut went slack, the current changed its song, clean, open, safe. And here's the part that's going to stick with you. Because when Darla tried to go live crying sabotage, the patrol officer cut through the noise with one word. Back silence landed like a hammer. I called it abatement. She called it theater. The water, as always, just told the truth. We made the handoff to the collection crew outside the breakwater. Receipts, signed logs, updated, every hand documented. You know what? I felt peace, heavy and clean for the first time in weeks. The board tried to spin it, but when the insurer's memo came, coverage denied for loss arising from excluded hazards, they couldn't dodge the math. The motion to remove Darla as president carried on the first vote. Later, a neighbor, the same one who called me stubborn, came over awkward and said, "Thank you." His son showed me a video kayak almost tipping in that pinch. Proof is proof. The county sent a letter, warnings, cleared notice, withdrawn training scheduled. Trent's crew pulled the last anchors, filled the holes, set new posts as a real gift for the youth sailing program. No applause, just quiet nods. Neighbors asked if it was over. I said it's quieter. Lane clear, flags down, kids fishing from the bank with lines so light they might as well be hope itself. Justice wasn't about medals or boardroom speeches. It was about water remembering better than any committee. 7 million buys you noise, but not the tide. So here's my question. Would you have fought it or waited for someone else to draw the line? Drop a comment. Let me know your take on justice, right and wrong, or share your own battle story. If you made it this far, you know sometimes keeping your waters calm means letting your receipts do the shouting. That's all from me, at least until the next storm rolls in.